I hired a handyman to fix the burst pipe under my son-in-law's kitchen sink while my daughter and her husband were away at a conference in Vancouver. 2 hours later, he called me, and I could hear it in his voice before he even got the words out. "Sir, there's a child locked in the basement. A little boy. He's alone down there, and he's been crying for a long time." I drove there in 11 minutes. I don't remember most of the drive. My name is Gordon Ellsworth. I'm 67 years old, and I live in Oakville, Ontario, about 20 minutes from where my daughter and her husband bought their house 3 years ago. I spent 34 years as a licensed social worker with the Children's Aid Society of Ontario before I retired. I've walked into a lot of houses where things weren't what they seemed on the outside. You get a feel for it. The way a child goes quiet when an adult enters the room. The way a parent's smile doesn't quite reach their eyes. The way certain doors are always closed. I never thought I'd need that instinct in my own family. My daughter. I'll call her by what she's always been to me. My daughter is 31 years old. She works as a marketing coordinator for a pharmaceutical company downtown Toronto. Smart girl. Driven. She got that from her mother, God rest her. Her mother passed 11 years ago from a stroke, sudden and early, 52 years old. After that, it was just the two of us for a long while, and we were close, really close. The kind of close where you talk every few days, where she calls you on her lunch break just to hear your voice, where you still have dinner together most Sundays. That changed when she married Lyle. Lyle Carver. 35 years old, works in commercial real estate, makes good money. Or at least that's the impression he works very hard to give. He drives a leased BMW, wears clothes with little logos on the breast pocket, talks about investment portfolios at dinner like he's waiting for someone to be impressed. The first time my daughter brought him home, he shook my hand and said he'd heard so much about me and my work with at-risk youth. The way he said it, the slight pause before at-risk, like he was handling something unpleasant. That was the first thing I noticed. The second thing I noticed was how my daughter changed around him. Not dramatically. Nothing you could point to. Just a certain softness gone from her posture, a careful quality to the way she laughed, like she was checking first to see if it was allowed. I told myself I was projecting. Old social workers do that. We see patterns where there are none. They'd been married 2 years when my daughter called me one Sunday evening, sounding different, lighter than she'd been in months. "Lyle and I have been thinking," she said, "about your old house on Hawthorne Crescent. I'd been in the same house for 26 years, raised my daughter there, but after she moved out and her mother was gone, the 4 bedrooms were just rooms I walked past. I'd been talking about selling for 2 years without doing anything about it. We'd like to buy it," she said. "A proper price, of course. No favors." But that's exactly what it was. I sold it to them for $115,000 below market value. A family deal, I told myself. A way to stay connected. A way to make sure she had something solid under her feet. What I got in return was a slow fade. It wasn't all at once. First, the Sunday dinners became twice a month, then once a month. Then we're just so slammed right now, Dad, maybe next weekend. The phone calls got shorter. I'd ask how she was doing, and she'd say, "Fine, great actually, super busy." I'd mention stopping by, and there'd be a pause just a little too long, before she said, "Of course, just let me check with Lyle about the schedule." The schedule. Like visiting her father required coordinating with management. 14 months went by where I didn't set foot in that house. My house. The house where I'd installed the ceiling fan in the kitchen, and built the deck in the backyard, and planted the 2 maples out front that by now must be throwing good shade over the driveway. Then in late September, on a Tuesday morning, my phone rang and it was Lyle. He didn't say hello. He said, "Gordon, favor to ask. I've got a plumbing situation. There's a pipe under the kitchen sink that's been leaking. I've had a slow drip going for a few weeks, and I think it's gotten worse. We're heading to Vancouver Thursday for a conference. Both of us, 4 days, and I don't want to come back to a flooded kitchen. Would you mind organizing someone to have a look while we're gone?" I sat with the phone against my ear and let that sit for a moment. 14 months without a proper visit. No invitation to see the house. No Sunday dinner. No thanks for helping us buy the place we're currently living in. But there was a leaking pipe, and they needed something organized, and I was retired, so I had the time. Right? I said yes. Of course I said yes. She was still my daughter. I called a plumber I knew through a neighbor, a fellow named Amir who does good work and doesn't charge you for things you don't need. I gave him the address and the spare key I still had from when the house was mine. Told him it was a slow leak under the kitchen sink, probably the supply line fitting. Told him to have a thorough look and fix whatever needed fixing. They want it sorted before they get back, I said, while the house is empty. Amir texted me Thursday afternoon to say he'd arrived and was getting started. I went back to what I'd been doing, which was refinishing a set of chairs I'd found at an estate sale in Burlington, stripping decades of varnish to get back to the wood underneath. I was on the second chair when my phone rang. Amir. I answered on the second ring. Mr. Ellsworth. His voice was careful, controlled, like he was choosing each word. I need you to come here, to the house, as soon as you can. What's wrong? He paused. There's a child in the basement, a little boy. I heard crying when I came in, and I thought maybe it was the television, or someone next door, but it kept going, and I found there's a door in the back of the laundry room. It was latched from the outside. I was already on my feet. How old? I don't know. Maybe 5, 6. He won't come near me. He's sitting in the corner. I've got the door open, but I don't want to. I don't want to go in and frighten him more. I don't know what to do. Don't go in. Stay where he can see you. Don't block the doorway. Talk to him quietly. Doesn't matter what you say. Just keep your voice low and calm and steady. I'm 11 minutes away. I was there in 8. Amir was standing in the laundry room doorway, exactly where I'd told him to be, when I came down the basement stairs. He stepped back when he heard me, and I saw his face. He was shaken. This was a man who'd been working in trades for 20 years, who'd seen flooded basements and collapsed ceilings and 100 different kinds of household disaster. What he'd found today was a different category entirely. The door he'd been standing outside was a storage room at the back of the laundry space. Not finished. Concrete floor, bare drywall, a bare bulb overhead on a pull cord. The kind of room you use for holiday decorations and old paint cans. Inside, in the far corner, was a small boy. He was sitting with his back against the wall and his knees pulled up to his chest, exactly the way a child holds himself when he's been waiting a very long time. He was thin. Too thin for his frame. His hair needed cutting. He had on a long-sleeved shirt that was too big and sweatpants that were too short, and on his feet were socks with no shoes. There was a sleeping bag on the floor, the cheap kind folded into thirds, a plastic bin with a lid, a water jug, the kind you fill from a tap, about a quarter full, on the floor near him, a granola bar wrapper, empty, and 2 more granola bars still in their wrappers. He looked at me when I came in. He didn't run. He didn't make a sound. He just watched me with the careful measuring look that children develop when they've learned that adults cannot be trusted on sight. I crouched down just inside the doorway. I didn't move closer. I'd done this hundreds, always the same. Let them set the pace. Hi there, I said. My name is Gordon. I'm not going to come any closer unless you want me to. Is that okay? He stared at me. Can you tell me your name? Nothing for a long moment. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. Theo. Wait, my mind caught on it for just a second. Then let it go. I could place it later, Theo. How old are you? 6. He paused. I'll be 7 in March. That's coming up soon. March is a good month. You doing okay? Are you hurt anywhere? He shook his head. Are you hungry? A small nod. Very small, like he wasn't sure if admitting it was allowed. Okay. I've got some food in my truck, nothing fancy. Granola bars and some crackers, I think, maybe an apple. Can I go get them and bring them back for you? He looked at the door behind me, like he was checking whether I was going to close it. I'll leave the door open, I said. I promise. I'll be back in 2 minutes. I went up to my truck and got the small bag I keep in the back seat. Retirement means you have time to be the person who actually has snacks. And I took my phone out too and called 911 before I went back downstairs. I told them what I'd found. I gave them the address. I said I needed police and a children's aid worker. They said someone was on the way. When I came back down, Theo hadn't moved. I set the bag down just inside the doorway and sat on the floor myself, cross-legged, so I was lower than him. He ate the crackers. Then an apple slice by apple slice, taking his time. He kept glancing at the door. "Whose house is this, Theo? Do you know?" "My mom and Lyle," he said. The cold arrived somewhere around my sternum and just spread. My mom, Lyle. Lyle Carver. My daughter's husband. I kept my face neutral. 34 years of professional practice. My voice didn't shake. "And where's your mom right now?" "She went on a trip. Lyle said they'd be back soon." "Did they tell you how many days?" He thought about it. "Not really." Lyle put the food in the box. He pointed at the plastic bin. He said to eat a little bit at a time and stay quiet. I opened the bin while he watched. Inside, 6 more granola bars, a bag of crackers, a peanut butter jar with a plastic knife, a box of juice boxes. 4 juice boxes. Enough for maybe 2 days if you were careful. They'd been gone since Thursday. It was now Thursday afternoon. So either they just left or… "Theo, when did they leave?" He thought harder. "A few sleeps," he said, "a few sleeps." So I sat on the concrete floor next to this little boy who I had never seen before in my life. This child who was living in my daughter's house, eating crackers and counting sleeps while she was at a conference in Vancouver. And I understood something that rearranged everything. My daughter had a son, or her husband did, and neither of them had ever told me. The police arrived 8 minutes later. Constable Andrea Yuen came downstairs first, assessed the situation in about 4 seconds, then crouched down near the doorway the same way I had. She was good with him, calm, unhurried. She asked his full name, Theodore Carver. She asked where he went to school. He named a school in the west end of Mississauga. She asked about any brothers or sisters. He shook his head. She asked about his mom. "She goes on trips sometimes," he said. Then he added quietly, "Lyle says I have to stay in here when they go. He says if I come upstairs someone might see me and I'll have to go away." "Go away where?" Constable Ewan asked. He shrugged. "He said to a bad place. He said it's better if I stay hidden." I'd heard adults say versions of that to children in storage rooms and back bedrooms and locked apartments for 34 years. It never got easier. They called the Children's Aid Society of Ontario. A worker named Linda Park arrived within 40 minutes. I knew Linda. We'd worked 3 cases together before I retired. She came down the stairs and stopped when she saw me sitting on the floor next to a 6-year-old eating crackers. "Gordon?" She said it the way you say someone's name when you're not sure you're seeing what you think you're seeing. "This is my son-in-law's house," I said. I didn't know this child existed until about an hour ago. She closed her eyes for just a moment. Then she opened them, and she was back in professional mode. I recognized it because I'd done the same thing myself more times than I could count. You learn to put the personal reaction away until later. You have to. "Tell me everything," she said. I told her about the call from Lyle, about sending Amir to fix the pipe, about the phone call and what Amir had found. I told her about the plastic bin and the 4 juice boxes and a few sleeps. I told her about the school Theo had named. She was writing while I talked. Constable Yoon took Theo upstairs while Linda and I spoke, got him onto the couch with a glass of water and the TV on, so he could hear voices and feel like the world was ordinary for a few minutes. I watched him settle into the couch cushions with the careful gratitude of a child who's been cold for a long time and has just found somewhere warm. "We'll need to contact his father," Linda said. "His father?" I looked at her. "Theodore Carver. His mother is deceased. Ovarian cancer, 2 years ago. Lyle Carver was granted sole custody." She showed me the screen of her tablet. There it was. I thought about the money. I asked about it. "There's a trust," she said. "Insurance payout from the mother's policy. Lyle has been named trustee." She looked at me over the tablet. "You know where I'm going with this." I did. I'd seen it before. A trustee account with a child beneficiary and a parent who controls access. "Check the withdrawals," I told her. "Check whether the disbursements match documented expenses for the child. School fees, medical visits, clothing, food. Check what's actually been spent on Theo versus what's been taken. She was already making notes. Theo was treated at Trillium Health Partners that evening. He was malnourished. Not acutely, not in immediate danger, but chronically. The kind of thinness that tells you this hadn't been one incident but a pattern. Months of being fed less than he needed. He was also significantly behind developmentally in language for a child his age, consistent with extended isolation. The attending pediatrician was careful about how she said that last part, but I understood what she meant. I sat in the waiting room while they examined him, and I thought about my daughter. I thought about the way she'd sounded on the phone these past 14 months. Fine. Great, actually. Super busy. I thought about the house I'd sold her below market value so she'd have something solid. I thought about Lyle's voice on the phone, flat and efficient, asking me to handle the plumber because I was retired and had the time. While his son sat in a storage room in the basement, while Theo counted sleeps. I thought about the deck I'd built in that backyard. The 2 maples out front. My phone rang at 9:30 that evening. Lyle. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Then my daughter called, and I answered on the 4th ring. Dad. Her voice was strange, high and controlled. The police called us. They said, I know what they said, I told her. Dad, I can explain. A 6-year-old boy was locked in the basement of your house, I said, with 4 juice boxes and a bag of crackers. I need you to tell me when you found out about Theo, and I need you not to lie to me. Silence. How long? I asked. Another silence. Then we didn't think it would be. How long? 18 months, she said. The cold in my chest had been spreading since I opened that storage room door. By now there wasn't much warmth left. 18 months. My daughter had known for 18 months that her husband had a son he was hiding in a basement. And she hadn't said a word. We're coming home tomorrow, she said. Yes, I said. You are. And when you do, the Children's Aid Society and the Peel Regional Police will both want to speak with you. I've already given my statement. Dad, not tonight, I said, and I hung up. I drove back to Oakville near midnight. My house felt different, quieter. I made tea I didn't drink, and sat at the kitchen table, and looked at a photograph on the bookshelf across the room. My daughter at maybe 8 years old, sitting on the deck I'd built, eating a popsicle, squinting into the sun. She'd been such an easy kid, curious, kind, the kind of child who'd stop to watch a caterpillar cross the path and want to know where it was going. I didn't know what happened to that girl, but I knew what I was going to do next. I called Linda Park at 7 the following morning. I want to apply for emergency kinship care, I told her, for Theo. Gordon, you know the process isn't instantaneous. I know the process better than most. I helped revise the kinship placement guidelines in 2009, Linda. Theo has no maternal relatives on record, and his father is under investigation for child neglect and potential financial exploitation of a trust established for his son's benefit. I'm a retired caste social worker with a clean record and a stable home. Emergency kinship care exists precisely for this situation. She was quiet for a moment. I'll send you the forms. They arrived before 8. I had them completed and submitted before 10. The preliminary background check cleared by early afternoon. Linda called at 3 to say they were expediting the review given Theo's circumstances, and that he could be placed with me on a temporary basis beginning that evening, pending the full investigation. I also called a lawyer that morning. Her name was Margaret Croft, a family law solicitor in Mississauga, whose name I'd gotten years ago from a colleague at the CAS when she'd done excellent work in a difficult custody dispute. Her office was on Hurontario Street, 4th floor, the kind of office where the degrees on the wall are framed without fuss, which I took as a good sign. She listened to the whole story without interrupting once. When I finished, she said, there are 2 tracks here. The criminal track, the police and the Crown Attorney's Office will handle potential charges of child abandonment and failure to provide the necessities of life. Those are serious charges in Canada, Mr. Ellsworth. Section 215 of the Criminal Code. And then there's the civil track, which is where I come in. Lyle Carver holds guardianship of Theodore. To change that, We need to demonstrate to the court that he is unfit, and we need to establish a basis for you to seek permanent guardianship as a third party. Can we do that? Based on what you've described, the conditions Theo was found in, the pattern of malnourishment, the isolation, the potential misuse of the trust funds. Yes, I think we can build a strong case. She paused. I should ask, what about your daughter? I looked at the window. My daughter had known for 18 months. She'd sat across from me at Sunday dinners, when there were Sunday dinners, and said nothing. She'd let me sell her a house for $115,000 below market value, let me arrange the plumber, let me walk into that situation blind, and said nothing. I don't know yet what my daughter's liability is, I said, but she's not my priority right now. Theo is. Margaret nodded, slow and sure. My retainer is $7,500 and my hourly rate is $325. For a case this complex, you should expect the process to take 6 to 12 months. I had savings. It would cost. I said, when do we start? She tapped her pen on the legal pad. She had the same satisfied expression that good lawyers get when a case is genuinely winnable. We already have. I picked Theo up from Trillium that evening. He had the same plastic bag with the same hospital issue items and the stuffed bear a nurse had given him. He climbed into the back seat of my truck and looked out the window at the October streets going past, the leaves off most of the trees by now, the streetlights coming on early. Where are we going? He asked. To my house. You're going to stay with me for a while. He thought about that. Okay, he said quietly. My house in Oakville is a bungalow. 3 bedrooms because I'd never gotten around to converting the spare ones, which turned out to be fortunate. I set Theo up in the room at the back, the one that had been my daughter's when she was small, which had a window that faced the backyard and the old oak tree she used to climb. I made the bed with clean sheets and found a spare duvet in the closet. He stood in the doorway looking at the room like he was waiting for permission. You can go in, I said. It's your room while you're here. He went in slowly, walked to the window, looked out at the tree, turned around. Is there food? He asked. Of course there is. What do you like? He thought about it a long time, like it was a test question, and he wasn't sure of the answer. Macaroni and cheese, he finally said, very small. That I can do, I told him. He ate 2 full bowls and a glass of milk and half a banana, and then he fell asleep on the couch before I'd even finished cleaning up, still wearing his socks, one hand curled under his cheek. I covered him with the blanket from the back of the armchair and sat in the chair across the room and watched him breathe. 67 years old. I'd been planning to take a trip in the spring. I'd been looking at the Cabot Trail, maybe a few weeks in Cape Breton, something I'd been putting off for years. I'd been thinking about getting a dog. I'd been thinking about long mornings with coffee and no particular schedule. Instead, I was watching a 6-year-old boy sleep on my couch. This child I hadn't known existed 8 hours ago. This boy who'd been eating ration granola bars in a basement storage room and counting sleeps until someone came back for him. I didn't feel cheated out of my retirement plans. I felt like someone who has been doing one thing for 34 years and suddenly understands very clearly why. Lyle called at 10 the following morning. My daughter called at 10:15. I let them both go to voicemail. At 10:30, my phone rang again. Lyle, I answered. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. You need to stay out of this, Gordon. Theo is my son. You had no right to call the authorities. I called 911 because I found a malnourished child locked in a storage room with 4 juice boxes and enough food for 48 hours, I said. What would you have preferred I do? You don't understand the situation. Explain it to me. A pause. This is between me and my family. Theo is 6 years old and he weighs 38 pounds, I said. The pediatrician who examined him last night told me that's in the 3rd percentile for his age. Your lawyer will get all of this in the disclosure package. You can't keep him, he said. I'll fight you on this. I know you will, I said. I'm counting on it. I hung up. I could hear Theo in the kitchen, where I'd left cereal and milk on the counter at his height. I heard the scrape of the chair legs on the floor, the clink of the bowl. Small sounds, ordinary sounds. I sat for a moment in the front room, and I thought about the trust fund. Margaret had already contacted a forensic accountant she worked with regularly. The preliminary assessment, based on the account statements Linda Park's team had pulled, suggested that over the preceding 22 months, approximately $31,000 had been withdrawn from Theo's trust for expenses that didn't match any documented child-related costs. No school fees, no medical bills, no clothing receipts. There was, however, a record of a lease payment on a BMW, criminal proceedings for failure to provide the necessities of life, a CAS investigation into Lyle's fitness as a guardian, a civil case for third-party guardianship, a forensic audit of the trust, and my daughter, somewhere in the middle of all of it, who had known for 18 months and said nothing. Margaret had been direct about that part. Your daughter's knowledge of the situation, and her failure to report it or act on it, could constitute a separate offense. It's possible she'll also face consequences. I'd sat with that for a long time. She was still my daughter. She was also a 31-year-old adult who had watched a child be locked in a basement and chosen to say nothing. Those two things were both true, and I couldn't unknot them. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But Theo was in my kitchen eating cereal. That part I could do something about. I went into the kitchen and sat across the table from him. He had milk on his upper lip, and he was eating with the focused attention of a child who has learned not to take food for granted. After a while, he looked up at me. "Grandpa," he said tentatively, testing the word, the way my daughter used to test new words when she was his age, tasting them first. I hadn't told him to call me that. He'd arrived at it on his own. "Yeah," I said. He looked back at his bowl. Is this where I live now?" "For now, yes." He thought about that. "Okay," he said. Outside the window, the October light was low and pale, and the old oak tree in the backyard still had a handful of leaves hanging on. I'd built a small bench under that tree years ago, and I thought that come spring, when the weather turned, I'd take Theo outside and show him how to climb it. I thought about Cape Breton and decided it could wait. I thought about the forensic accountant's report and the Crown Attorney's office and Margaret Croft's legal pad and 34 years of knowing exactly what the system could do when it was pointed in the right direction. Lyle Carver thought he could hide his son from the world and suffer no consequence. He thought I was a retired old man who handled plumbing arrangements and had no further use. He forgot what I'd done for 34 years. He forgot that I knew every form and every procedure and every person who mattered in a process like this. He forgot that I'd spent my entire career making sure children like Theo didn't stay in storage rooms. He'd made exactly one call too many.